Hey everyone, welcome to The Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. I'm Chelsea Ranieri, and today's guest is a visionary thought leader, master motivator, author, TV host, and empowerment entrepreneur who is featured in our Kick-Ass Woman issue this year. She is also the host of the podcast Exquisitely Aligned, which is ranked among the top 3% globally. Thank you so much for being here today, Gina Maier Vincent.
Thank you for having me, Chelsea. I'm glad because you were on my show and I had so much fun. It's an honor to be on yours. Thank you.
I know. As soon as we finished, I felt so inspired when I got to do your podcast, and I was so excited to get to do this one too. So can't wait to talk with you and want to share your journey with our listeners.
Thank you.
Awesome. So you were born and raised on Long Island. Can you share a bit about your childhood and what you were like?
Yes. So I was probably a little bit of a thorn in the side for my parents, but you know, they still love me. So that's a blessing. And I grew up on Long Island. And it was fun because, Chelsea, it was really, truly a melting pot. I didn't realize that till I left New York, how fortunate I was to be surrounded. Every house had a different background. My dad's an immigrant from Germany. My mom's first generation Italian on her side. Wow. And so there was a lot of good food, a lot of good holidays. You know, when you went from house to house learning, I think being a child of an immigrant taught me some fun, fabulous things, like what it is like to persevere, be vulnerable, stretch, learn new things, work ethics. And as a kid, I was the child with rose-colored glasses. I still like to wear them every day. I always saw possibilities when I realized others didn't quite see what I saw. And I was pretty intuitive or maybe sensitive or both, where even when somebody wouldn't say how they were feeling, I could feel it. And, you know, sometimes adults would squash that for you, like, yeah, no. So.
Yeah, totally. I completely understand that. Well, I read that you graduated from New York's Fashion Institute of Technology with a major in fashion buying and merchandising, and then a second degree in marketing and merchandise management before you worked at Belk and Candies. So what inspired you to pursue a career in the fashion industry? This sounds like the dream.
Yeah, it was the dream until it wasn't, quite frankly. You know, from a very young age, I was very much about expressing myself, through clothing. And, you know, I was too young to decide what my hair should look like. Although when I got older, I told my parents what I wanted, you know, and very firmly. They didn't always agree, but, you know, now I get to make my own choices. But I believe we have the ability to express ourselves without even opening our mouth by our choice of hair, makeup, if, you know, clothing, jewelry, how we carry ourselves when we're walking or when we're looking at somebody. And so fashion for me was always just another outlet of self-expression. And FIT was phenomenal because I was finally surrounded by like-minded people, which really felt great. But it was a way for me to bring together my passion for expression along with my passion for business. And that's how I became a department store buyer, worked for Candy Shoes, had 9 states as my territory. Yeah, wow. It was fun, Chelsea, until it's a fun industry. I don't want to turn anybody away from it, but you need to go in with the eyes open. It is cutthroat. It is, I mean, back to Long Island. I grew up in the largest high school on the island, 1,504 of us in my graduating class, which had perks and negatives, right? If you wanted to excel, you really had to work hard to be seen and heard. So, you know, that industry is a bit cutthroat, especially in New York.
Yeah, I'm literally picturing Devil Wears Prada. Yeah. Okay, so you talk in your book, this part had me in its grips, but you talk in your book about an engagement that you ended in your 20s. Yeah. So can you talk a bit about what your intuition was telling you in that moment? Because I would imagine that was probably a really difficult time.
It was. I went through this chasing success, as I like to call it, and checking off all the boxes. I mean, I did college like we just talked about. I had the career moved me to North Carolina. I was feeling like I was in the right place and space. Now I'm, mid to late 20s, and I was dating someone. We were extremely compatible. I say that with my tongue in cheek. But it got to a point 6 months into the 9-month engagement. I couldn't look myself in the mirror when I put on my lipstick, which was quite awkward. Good thing I have full lips, right? but also when I brushed my teeth, when I washed my face, when I passed, like when the sun hit me right so that my reflection showed in the car window as I opened the door, like I just couldn't look at myself anymore. And I had to ask myself, what is this about? Like, I want to be married. I want to be married to him. And what I realized was the life he was on cruise control for was a hell of a lot smaller than I wanted. I'll never forget. It was like one thing I said to him was, I realize we can't go to Europe this year, but next year, because you'll be giving up your apartment and moving into my condo, we'll have all this extra money. I want to take you to Europe. You'll see where I've gone and then let's explore something. And he said, no, we can't do that. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it was like, yeah, no, we're never going to be able to afford that. And I was like, oh, like you're suffocating me. And I realized he was on cruise control for a life that was way too small for what I envisioned for myself. So it was bittersweet to call it off. For me, it was like being in the morgue, looking at the white picket fence with the little puppy and the baby stroller. And you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was, but at the same time, Chelsea, it was like the first time that I really stood up for my beliefs and what I wanted, because this was for me the rest of my life.
Yeah. Right. Did your family have any opinions on that, or your friends?
Everyone supported me. Good, I mean, my mom and dad, my dad's a very quiet German man. My mom's talkative Italian like I am. But my mom said, you know what, Gina, it wouldn't have been that you had a bad marriage. Like he would have never cheated on you. You would have never cheated on him. It's just, you would have never been fully happy. Yeah. And I think, here I'm 28, crying my eyes out, having to tell people, hey, there is no wedding. And then when, people are like, oh, how many days? And you're like, like you're constantly reliving almost like it's a death of that quote unquote future that I had made a plan for. But when she said it that way, and my parents liked him enough, he would have fit in the family. We had a lot of the same values, but his dreams were nowhere near what I like. Here I'm sitting in California speaking to you. Like, I don't think that would have ever come to fruition. It would have been a very like, we're here in North Carolina. This is where we stay, or at least somebody somewhere nearby that's affordable.
Right. Yeah. As someone who's been to Europe, I can't imagine never being able to go back. Yeah. Well, tell me how you met your husband, Mark.
So there I was in North Carolina, in Charlotte, working as a department store buyer, and had quit that job, started something else that felt like a fish out of water. Mm-hmm. And he was living there. He was born in the UK, in England, right outside of London, came to the States when he was about 3, became a citizen when he was early teens, and had lived multiple places besides DC, Florida, Boston, and now was in a different county, but very close to Charlotte. And my aunt introduced us. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, very cool. And, she had well, I don't know. I never asked her. Was this a setup? She's just like, I'd like to see, so-and-so's son. So when I come through, and his mom had already passed away, but they changed their trip. By the time they came, he and I had been out on many dates and were engaged. So it was
oh my God.
Yeah. So it was quite fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
How soon after ending your engagement did you guys meet?
Almost 2 years.
Oh, wow. Literally perfect timing too.
Yeah, right. Because then I kissed a few more frogs.
Yeah. I love that. Well, you later transitioned out of the fashion industry to teaching yoga and focusing on mindset shifts. So what led to this change in direction?
So at that point, I'm married to Mark. I have my first biological child, which is our son. And I just felt called to go to yoga. I was always flexible. My sister used to call me Gumby, but I went to yoga because I felt like I was missing something. And I wanted more depth in my life. And when I went to class, I felt like I immediately got it. My husband noticed a change in, like, when he came home from work. Here I am, a stay-at-home mom at this point with an infant. And those days are fun, but also challenging, right? I would have loved to put on my false eyelashes, my lipstick, and some heels and gone to be in a paying job versus cleaning up a dirty diaper or whatever, a colic crying baby. I mean, they're all blessings, right? I'm saying this laughing to you. It was my choice to stay home. But he could see a difference when he came home at dinner time, like, okay, you didn't make it to class today. And I realized then when he say that, he's like, you're a totally different person when you get to class. And I was reading a lot of yoga books and loving every single one of them. But one book said one sentence, and it was written beautifully. I'm going to butcher it, but it was about the fact, if you want to learn something, teach it. So at dinner, I told my husband, I want to teach yoga. He said, okay, great. And I said, no, I'm being serious. Like, this is an investment of time, money, and energy. He's like, yeah, no, I think you should. I think this is who you are. And it just took off from there. It was, I would say, people, I like to ask my clients to listen to the compliments they get, because I think those are our signs of what people appreciate and value and see as our gifts. And I think they are our gifts. And I always got the compliment of the mindset. Like, something you said 2 days later really struck a chord when XYZ happened. And I wasn't the instructor who was going to make you a 00 from a size 12, I wasn't the instructor who was going to make you sweat to death, but I was the instructor who would give you a different way of seeing something. And that's how then the ball kept rolling.
Yeah, I have had yoga teachers like that, where at the very end, when you're in Shavasana and they say like a certain quote and you're like, God, that like really hits for what I'm going through right now. And you walk away from class feeling so like lighter, so much lighter and just happier. Yeah. And inspired. So I can imagine how incredible your classes were.
Oh, well, thank you. But it's true. I mean, it's like, if we allow ourselves to just be in that moment and hear the messages, and maybe not every single sentence strikes a chord, but like you said, you do go home feeling lighter, and it's for me, it's priceless.
100%. Well, you touched on this a little bit when you said you wanted something a little bit more, and yoga was that for you, but you confided in a friend about wanting more out of life. And what she said was not very nice, but can you talk a bit about what you were feeling in that moment, and also, how that conversation went?
Yeah. So I'll start with how it went. So, I was at a place where I was a mom of one, our son. We had just gotten back from a 5-year anniversary trip, just Mark and I, to Venice. It was the first time we left our son with my mom and my aunt. They had a great time, and we had a great time, as adults, the adulting. And this friend of mine was also from up north, the Northeast. And she was married longer than I, older than I, and had 2 kids, where I had 1 at the time. So I was confiding in her, like thinking she was going to have all the wisdom, and I was struggling for my words. And I was like, I just want, like, I'm grateful, I'm happy, but I just want, and more came out of my mouth, and it was like an ellipsis, ... because I was still trying to figure out the words. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. If looks could kill, I would have been dead. She said, what are you kidding me? You married a doctor, you live on a golf course, and you have a baby, and you just came back from Venice. And I was like, talk about judgment. Yeah. And then I felt guilty, Chelsea, because I was like, wow, I thought I could be honest and vulnerable, because she knew me longer than my husband. And although I had this conversation with my husband, he was like, I'll get it for you. What do you want? Tell me. Yeah. And I was like, it's not a thing. Like, I don't know what it is. It's not a thing, but it's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that leaves any husband perplexed because they want to fix and help and guide. And so I thought being a female ahead of me in like the life cycle, if you want to call it that, she was like 6, 7 years ahead of me. I thought she was going to take me under her wing and said, okay, come here. Let's have a chat. Do you want to have a tea or a glass of wine? Like, let's talk this through. And it was so not that that visual of zip it, lock it, throw away the key. I did that for a while. And in the back of my mind, went down this rabbit hole of why can't I speak my truth? Why can't I have everything I thought I wanted, check, 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 and still want something else? It was almost like going back, now that I think about it, and I won't say his name, I call him Dave in the book because he's really a nice guy. It just wasn't, we weren't to be married, but we'll call him Dave. But it goes back to like the mentality of Dave. Like, it's like, you have everything, shut up,
Yeah.
It was horrible, Chelsea. I can't even put enough words to it. It was just, it left me in a cycle of like downward spiral for a bit, but thank God for yoga, because I would still be teaching and taking classes to uplift my spirits, but it left me kind of perplexed, I would say.
Yeah. I wish that she had been like, okay, like seen it like, well, if you have all these things, it's externally, what's going on internally, and how can we like feed your soul? And yeah, right. So that's a bummer. I can imagine a lot of people maybe would see someone with the check on social media. You have all these things. You look so happy. Maybe that person necessarily like wants something. So I completely understand where you were coming from. Well, 2009 was an incredibly transformative year. I was flying through these pages in the book, like trying to get to, I did not know what was going to happen, but can you share a bit about what your family is going through at this time?
Yeah. So the economy was on a downward spiral. I'm going to use the word crashing because in my world, it was like everything perfect and beautiful just all of a sudden fell apart. We had just brought our daughter, we adopted from Guatemala, home. She was 6.5 months old and cute as could be, like happiest child ever. Our son and she got along, and it like from day one, she was in a foster home who had a little boy our son's age. So like he started playing with her and she was, ready to play again because she had been with a little boy his age. And I just felt like everything was complete. Like, I think I always wanted 2 children. And I always thought if I had one, it would be just as fine. I knew I didn't want to have 12 because that's just not my personality. I'd be like, where did you go? Hold on, I can't get up. And the laundry would just not work for me. But but it was like this point of which I was feeling really complete, really fulfilled. And then all of a sudden, Mark went, and I'll back it up. We knew, but Mark's mother had this disease called polycystic kidney. She passed of it, but that was in her early 60s. So I knew the day Mark proposed to me, he told me he knew he had it. And I said yes anyway, because I was like, oh, I'll give you my kidney. I said it flippantly, but I meant it. And it came time that he now needed a kidney. I went through all the book tells the very short version, and I'll try to keep this succinct, but I went through all the testing and was proven to be a good match for him because he has the most rarest blood type, but he's the universal recipient. So he can take anything. So that's a huge blessing. Yeah. But the surgery went wrong, the first surgery, and that took me off as his living donor. He now needed a deceased donor because he needed a kidney and a full liver. And so if you know anything, you can give a portion of your liver to somebody, but not your entire, right? You need your liver. So miraculously, a woman my age, my blood type, and also an organ donor passed. And he received her kidney. But it was me really standing up and going against the grain of what this is only my personal opinion, but of a very broken medical system I got him out of North Carolina and moved him to Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, Florida, who saved his life. A woman, very young, beautiful surgeon, operated on him for 11 and a half hours. They stopped at one point and said his heart is not cooperating. And they called me to say, we're closing him up. He's not getting organs. And I had just arrived. It was 2 a.m. in the morning to Florida. And I said, this is his wife. Don't close him up. This happened the first surgery. His heart does not like anesthesia. It goes down to like 28, 30 beats per minute. You're not going to lose him. It's just what his body does. And I said, please tell the surgeon, please tell the surgeon. And she's like, who are you? I said, I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm just his wife, but I'm telling you, this is the truth. And she called back 2 hours later and said, okay, we're continuing. But yeah, it was nerve wracking. And it really showed me that there are broken systems around us, and sometimes we funnel into that system, not by choice, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. And I became his advocate because I wanted him to live. I wanted our kids to have a dad. I wanted, you know what I mean? I'm glad I did it, but it was exhausting. You wouldn't have even recognized me.
No, I can't imagine. And there was a part of the book where you were talking about, it was like bittersweet because you wanted him to get a donor, but at the same time, you're hoping for a family to lose. I can't imagine how I hadn't really thought of that before I read your book. And I was like, wow, what a hard place to be in.
You don't. And it, sorry.
No,
it always brings tears to my eyes because even you saying it or me thinking back, it was a Sunday and it was right before Thanksgiving. It was the Sunday before Thanksgiving, 2009. And I was in prayer like I like to do and meditation. And I was like, please God, let him get organs before this date so that he could be home for the kids for Christmas because they were so young. And, it's like a fun time for them. It's important. Right. And they were scared, he wasn't living at home anymore. And we couldn't visit him. He was 6 hours away. But I realized all of a sudden, like, who the hell am I to wish someone's daughter, sister, aunt, mother, father, brother, whomever, grandparent. I mean, they wouldn't take a grandparent, but it would be a young person's, and then to know that it was somebody my age, same blood type, organ donor, like, it really hit home. And Chelsea, I don't what's the right word? Think poorly of you. You don't think about it until you're in that position where you're like counting down the days for a death so that somebody can have this gift of time. It's almost like waiting for a baby to be born, but it's the absolute negative of it,
Right.
Not negative, but opposite.
Yeah. God. Yeah. I can't even imagine. Well, you also spoke in the book about you changed your mindset from thinking of someday to prioritizing the now. And I can imagine how being in that situation would make you prioritize what's happening right now. So can you talk about how you made that shift?
Yeah, it was when Mark was sick and going through all of that, when he finally became better. It took a full year for him personally to recover from that surgery because I don't think anybody really knew just how sick he was. Even our best man came to visit and he just kind of grabbed my hand and said, I thought they were being kind to Mark because he was a fellow doctor and transplanting him before he was sick. And I was like, yeah, no, the man was skin and bones by this point. Our neighbors didn't even think he would survive. But, during that year of him recovering, I was trying to find my way back from weight gain, not sleeping. I just feel like my whole body went awry along with my mindset. I feel very grateful, thankful for my spiritual side, for that grounding along with yoga. But, let's see, what was your question? I just lost my
how did you make the shift to prioritize right now rather than someday this will happen?
Yeah, it was all of a sudden like, I think I'm invincible, but I realize we're not. And what I thought was like good enough or fine for now that we can have it later was like, all of a sudden it was like back to that New York minute where you're like on, I want to say speed, but I don't really mean the drug, but like your caffeine high, and it was like, I'm going to work my hardest, my darndest to figure this out. And I realized if I just became super intentional about my time, money, and energy and my choices, I mean, I think we're very fortunate. I think we take it for granted, myself included, because we get busy sometimes that, we get into this zone and we don't really realize we have choices. We live in a free will world. We don't have to say yes to every invitation. We don't have to feel guilty when we say no. You know what I mean? And we don't have to give an excuse as to why we're saying no. We can just say, lots of times I just say it doesn't align. It doesn't align with my business or with my plan for the day. And people are like, oh, okay. And that's right. They're like, I never heard that one before, but okay. But they come to respect. And then they're like, they might ask you a question, tell me a little more, or wow, that's empowering, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, I've realized just how precious time is. It's our invisible currency. And I think it's not until you're faced with something falling apart, like an engagement or a marriage or a health crisis, that you really realize that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Well, to fast forward a bit to your work with Exquisitely Aligned, you help guide clients in aligning their time, money, and energy, which you mentioned, with their deepest desires. Yeah. So can you talk a bit about how you do that?
For me, it's my biggest passion. It really excites me. You see how I'm different than the other one where I wanted to cry. So fortunately, I have a strategy, a methodology that I use. It's a lot of Q&A. I'll be honest with you. Someone asked, are you like doing energy work on people? What are you doing? And I was like, yeah, no, it's a lot of questions, but it's oftentimes questions that my clients will tell me, nobody ever asked me that. And I'll be like, okay, did you ever ponder it for yourself? No, and I think what happens, I mentioned the word busy before, we use it as a badge of honor where we feel proud that our schedule is jam-packed. But if it's jam-packed with things that are not fueling you and exciting you, I feel like you're exhausted. At least I was. And I apologize because we have an extra guest here on the show. I don't know if you see him zipping through with the fly. I have a fly in my
You're totally good.
So if you see me doing crazy things with my hands, it's because I have a guest in my office. I think when we slow down and are in a space where we trust somebody who's asking those questions, we can go deep. And I think oftentimes people have beliefs that have been with them for a long time. And listen, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we have these beliefs that maybe came from society, from our family, from our heritage, our faith, or where we lived. I've lived in 3 states now, in multiple different cities in each of the states. And you can feel a vibe, right, of what people believe is proper or appropriate or pretty or success, and it changes from city to city, country to country. But I think when we can slow down and be in a space where we can be vulnerable for somebody to ask us those questions, and then sometimes I challenge them and ask them, like, what would it take? I had somebody who didn't feel worthy, which is, I shouldn't say somebody. I've had many men and women who didn't feel worthy of whatever it is that they desired, that they realized they really wanted. And when I asked one of them, what would it take? They sat there for a few minutes. I let them cry because I think it's always good to let the emotions flow. And she finally said, permission. And I was like, okay, I can give you that, but your homework is you have to give yourself permission over the next 3 days. And sure enough, she texted me like within less than 24 hours. She's like, I feel it. I gave myself permission, and it was like she went from a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 to an 11 within a short period of time. And that changed everything for her, her business, her parenting, you know, her relationship to herself and the things she wanted in the future. So it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you're helping people like accomplish their dreams. That's incredible. Well, you've mentioned that you also help people reframe their idea of success. So can you talk a bit about reframing that concept?
Yeah. So I think oftentimes, like I had mentioned with the fiance, we go through and we check off the things that I think our parents, and I'm not blaming my parents, you know, we were very fortunate to go to college where my parents didn't. And so, it was a great opportunity, right? But you're like, okay, got the degree, then and it becomes this cycle of like, we see it with little kids, attention, they cry or they're doing their happy dance, they're cute, mom is videotaping them. Then we want approval as a teenager in our peer group. Then we get achievements, and then we go into business. We get these accolades, as you can see behind me, right? I have a couple of the magazines.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yours has not been framed yet. It's on my to-do list because that's like my most favorite. But we have these accolades, these acknowledgments, and then we feel empty sometimes. And I think because we're chasing somebody else's blueprint instead of our own. So I like to say, if you can slow down and really meditate, ask yourself the question, what do I desire? What would my more be? I had someone recently, a very high achieved, renowned person in their field, a male. And he said, I don't want anything. I have everything. And I said, there's not one thing. And he said, well, there is. And I said, what is it? He's like, my kids keep asking me, Dad, why do you have to keep going back to the office? Like, we want to play catch.
Oh,
and you know, exactly. Right. You're like, that is such a big more that you can't even put a price on it. And I think that if we realize that these kids quickly all of a sudden don't want to be around us. We're not the cool dad who they want to play catch with. They want to get on their bicycle and go see their friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they're in their bedroom on their phone or whatever. You're reading. I'm not classifying everybody's on their phone, but, you're no longer cool. And so I think if we would realize success doesn't have to be an item or something you buy and add to your garage or your tarmac, you know, it could be time with people you really enjoy, or walking away from a few friendships so you can add in just one or two amazing relationships that really lift you up and support you. And I think when you define that more, and then you can say yes to the things that motivate you, you start this pattern. And like I said, we talked about divine resources, time, money, and energy. And if you keep pairing them together, then you're creating the space. And before you know it, to me, it's like magic unfolds. So
yeah. Oh, it's so inspiring. Well, is there anything else coming up in your career that you would like for listeners to keep an eye out for?
Yes. So I'm excited to say that the audio version of my book is in the final zhuzhing up, the final, how do you say, little edits where I made a flubber. My mother said, you wrote the book. How could you make a mistake while you're filming? I'm like, yeah, it's not the same when you read aloud, like when you read in your head, right? So I was laughing about that question. And then I'm super excited to say that I just filmed my first 10 of a series of full year's worth of YouTube videos that'll launch. Yeah. So besides the podcast, like that'll air with you on it in a little bit, it'll be just me kind of teaching, asking questions. I don't want to say teaching, but let's say empowering, motivating, and asking some of the questions that I would ask a client on these YouTubes. And they're going to launch, I think, in the next 7 to 10 days, and they'll be uploaded every 6 days. So I'm excited.
Wow. Well, when this comes out, they'll already be out, and I will definitely be watching. So yeah,
okay, cool.
Very exciting.
That's
awesome. We're
awesome.
coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I have 3 final questions for you that we call three. Yeah. So first, one of your key teachings is about moving beyond the work-life balance myth. So what advice do you have for listeners who are trying to find that balance?
stop and think of it in a different way. I don't like to think of it as balance. First, I think your life comprises your mental health, physical health, your well-being, your friendships, your love relationships. It goes into your hobbies, the activities you like, travel also. So how could you just lump it into work and life? I think of it as more cyclical, like the not fashion, like nature, right? We have all the seasons, and fashion we do too, right? You're wearing boots to sandals to this. And I think if you can understand that our body moves through a cyclical stage as well, that you can then realize there are some times you're going to be called to work a little more and other times where you can back off. And I realize, yes, if you're working in corporate America, it might be a little bit different, but if you can kind of keep that mindset, and approach it as, I want to make sure I have enough energy for here and there. And also I was just on a show yesterday, and he walked away from a 13-year, very successful, high paying career because he just was walking towards burnout, in his words. And I think if you can know yourself enough to catch it before it happens, because that trying to balance it can lead to burnout. So if we can just reframe it into it's a cyclical, and maybe even talk to our boss, or if you're your own boss, which, right, there's many of us, we have to remember that and not be full speed ahead. I think we have to build in those times of rest. I think, Chelsea, because I think I told you while you were on my show, I like to go outside. So I always build breaks of 15 minutes or at 15 to 30 minutes to just walk outside and either rest or walk or drink a cup of hot tea or a glass of water. And it refuels me. And I think those are like mini vacations.
Yeah. I saw a video of this girl saying that for corporate America jobs, she sees herself as, for her job, she just sees herself as a consultant. Like, I am just here to do my best to help this company. Yes. My identity isn't tied to this role.
And that is the biggest thing. When I lost the job with Candies, I don't think I talk about it in the book, but I was laid off right before I was due a huge bonus. And the writing was on the wall. They withheld, 2 months of travel expenses that I had submitted. So they owed me thousands of dollars. And I think they were just short on money. But at that moment, I was, this was right after I called off the wedding. 3 months later, I lost my job. And I realized, oh my God, now I'm no longer Dave's fiance. I'm no longer a shoe sales rep for the Southeast. And it was the first time I realized that's a great mindset to have. Like, you're not your title. And I think in America, and I'm finding through podcasting, it happens all around the world. We kind of identify ourselves as Gina of Exquisitely Aligned, and there's more to each of us.
Yeah, it's hard to untangle that, but it's helpful if you can. Yeah. Well, we talked a bit about self-doubt on your podcast, and I would love if you can share with our listeners how you personally dealt with it.
Many times over, still it happens here and there. And I like to think about looking for signs, looking for positive signs, I should say. I think as an entrepreneur, a solo entrepreneur, solopreneur, there are moments where you feel alone. And I think each and every one of us can feel alone, especially like when I asked my girlfriend about my more, definitely felt alone. And I think self-doubt is a good thing. It's a sign that we're stepping out of our comfort zone, which I am a huge proponent of. I used to stretch people on the mat as a yoga instructor. Now I like to say I stretch them in their view of what's possible for themselves, their families, their loved ones, friendships, etc., their business. And I think if you can, again, like reframe that this is a sign that you're doing something possibly what I like to think of as extraordinary. You're really stretching yourself beyond what you thought was possible. And doubt does creep in, but it doesn't have to be the driver. And I'll give you an example quickly. The guy who interviewed me yesterday, we worked together. I don't know, 12 years ago, but didn't know each other well. It was a big organization. We weren't there at the same time. The way it worked, our schedules weren't the same. But he followed me on social media, and he reached out after an article I posted on LinkedIn. And he said, I have a podcast now. I don't know if you remember me back in Charlotte. Love to have you on the show. I said, great. I'd love to send you a book. You read it, and then if you like it, we could talk about little bits about what you thought. He showed me his book, Chelsea. He read it twice, had sticky notes, highlighted it. He's like, look, I read it twice already. I loved it.
Oh.
And I was like, and I told him, I said, Matt, I'm so grateful you said that to me right now in this moment, because just yesterday, I sat and I was feeling that doubt creep in. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I able to touch people in the way that I see or feel is my legacy, And so I think if we can, I like to say, talk to God, the universe, whatever it is, and say, show me a sign. And I didn't do that yesterday, but the sign came at 9:00 in the morning when he's like, look at your book, and I think if we can relax about the doubt and say, hey, just show me a sign that I'm on the right path, it becomes more like childlike and awe-inspiring than frightening.
Yeah. I love what you said in the beginning about self-doubt being like a sign that you're extending your limits and pushing your limits. That's such a great point. Well, lastly, if listeners could just take one key thing away from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
Yeah. For me, it would be like, anything is possible. Please take a stand for what you wish or desire. Give yourself that permission and make intentional choices all day long with your time, your money, and your energy. And really, if you want to go to Europe, right? We talked about that. Then maybe it's giving up the fancy coffee for a month to have more money to go to Europe and drink coffee there. I don't know, and maybe it's this friendship or this love relationship isn't supporting me in the way it needs to. And I think to really be seen, heard, and valued by yourself first, take yourself seriously, and then share with and you'll know immediately if somebody judges you, they're probably not your person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so true. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Gina. I had so much fun getting to talk with you again. You have the most incredible story and you're so incredibly inspiring. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you. You're brilliant. I love your energy, Chelsea, and it's always fun to be in your presence. Thank you. It's been a great honor.
Oh, thank you.